Well, Bill and Sade, accepting a plea agreement would mean that Sean Combs would have to admit to trafficking and force. And today he made it very clear that was not going to happen. Diddy maintained all along these encounters involved consenting adults and plans to take his chances that a jury agrees.
Music mogul Sean Diddy Combs back behind bars, a magistrate judge denying him bail, saying that there were no conditions that she could conceive of that would make her confident that he would appear again for other court appearances. The judge saying, "My concern is this is a crime that happens behind closed doors."
Difficult to reflect on the darkest times in your life. Sometimes you got to do that. I was fucked up. I hit rock bottom. But I make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video.
The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts. When he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
The air in the Manhattan courtroom on May 5th crackled with an unusual tension. On one side, Sean Diddy Combs, a titan of the music industry whose very name conjured images of lavish parties and chart-topping hits, strolled in expecting the routine commencement of jury selection. Little did he know, the proceedings would swiftly veer into the unexpected, punctuated by moments of dark humor that belied the gravity of the situation about to unfold. Judge Annalisa Torres, known for her sharp wit and no-nonsense demeanor, presided over the initial stages, and it wasn't long before her remarks had the entire room, even amidst the serious legal context, momentarily forgetting the stakes. Her playful commentary, particularly regarding Combs's seemingly endless list of stage names, a testament to his ever-evolving persona in the fickle world of entertainment, drew audible chuckles. She even quipped that the juror questionnaires might rival the epic length of The Lord of the Rings.
To a trial, believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong. Let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95 that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88. That helps the defense because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense.
A cultural touchstone that underscored the exhaustive scrutiny potential jurors would face in this high-profile case. Reporters, sensing the unusual levity, scrambled to capture these fleeting moments of dark humor, their pens and recorders working furiously. Diddy himself, a figure usually commanding attention with his charismatic presence, sat largely impassive behind wire-rimmed glasses, seemingly absorbing the unexpected punchline that the day had become before the true storm broke. But the laughter, as quickly as it had arrived, faded into an ominous silence as the reality of the situation began to dominate the courtroom. Before a single juror could even be sworn in, Combs found himself staring down the barrel of his most significant legal battle to date.
What made you come here to support Puff?
I'm supporting Puff because he's innocent, and I'm wholeheartedly believing his innocence, and I know he's innocent. So
you say you know he's innocent?
1,000%.
He knows the deck is stacked against him. They've got a ton of evidence. Take the plea deal, dude. Just take it.
Well, my guess is that, because we don't know the deal of the plea deal. At least I don't think we do.
True.
Okay.
A fight that threatened to unravel the empire he had painstakingly built over decades. The weight of the federal government's accusations hung heavy in the air. Prosecutors leveled 5 major felony charges against Combs, each carrying the potential for severe consequences. Among these were 2 counts of transporting individuals across state lines for illicit purposes, allegations that painted a disturbing picture of exploitation and abuse. These charges suggested a calculated and systematic effort to move individuals for unlawful activities, striking at the heart of federal law. Adding to this was a conspiracy count, a charge often used by prosecutors to demonstrate a broader pattern of illegal behavior involving multiple actors and coordinated efforts. According to the federal investigators,
Federal trafficking, racketeering, and charges beginning Monday morning.
Major developments tonight involving the case against Sean Diddy Combs, what he decided in court today, and what this now means, the move coming just 4 days before his trial is set to begin. Here's Aaron Katursky.
Tonight, Sean Combs makes it official. He's rejecting the government's offer to plead guilty and spare himself the possibility of a prolonged term in prison. When asked if he turned down the offer, Combs answered, "Yes, I do, Your Honor," as he stood in a baggy beige jail uniform. Terms were not disclosed, but prosecutors did say a plea could result in a shorter sentence for Combs than if he's convicted.
Diddy allegedly orchestrated a twisted operation that spanned years, utilizing his immense influence and resources to manipulate young women into compromising and potentially dangerous situations. The prosecution detailed a disturbing modus operandi involving pressure tactics, the allure of a glamorous lifestyle through fancy gifts, and cross-country trips facilitated by his private jets and entourage. This alleged system, they argued, was designed to ensnare and control vulnerable individuals, painting a stark contrast to the carefully curated public image Combs had cultivated. In the face of these damning accusations, Combs, now 55, stood firm, entering a plea of not guilty to every single charge. His legal team vehemently asserted his innocence, maintaining that all interactions referenced in the case were entirely consensual. While he issued a public statement expressing remorse for unspecified actions and a commitment to becoming a better man, he explicitly stated he was not asking for forgiveness, a carefully worded statement that walked a tightrope between acknowledging public sentiment and maintaining his legal defense. However, the prosecution painted a far more sinister picture. They argued that this entire alleged setup was meticulously constructed to benefit Combs's sprawling empire.
Diddy, who was sitting at the defense table with his attorneys, did not show any signs of emotion. He took a sip of water before he was led out of the courtroom by the U.S. Marshals. Now, his lawyers have vowed to fight this. They are going to be back in court on Wednesday before the judge who will oversee this trial and try to get Diddy to be released.
A machine that generated immense wealth and polished his public image. This facade of success and influence, they claimed, served as a shield, concealing a pattern of shady activity orchestrated behind layers of loyal staff, intricate shell companies designed to obscure financial trails, and airtight non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, intended to silence potential witnesses and victims. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Collins, a seasoned prosecutor known for her meticulous approach, addressed the court with a palpable sense of conviction. She declared that the government possessed irrefutable evidence, stating unequivocally that they've got the receipts. Collins asserted that the jurors would be presented with a clear and compelling pattern of behavior, meticulously documented through bank records that allegedly traced illicit payments, detailed travel logs that corroborated the movement of individuals across state lines, and, most crucially, first-hand accounts from individuals who claimed to have been victims of Combs's alleged scheme. This evidence, she argued, would paint a stark picture of control and manipulation, directly contradicting the defense's narrative of consensual interactions. This was no accident, Collins stated with emphasis, characterizing the alleged actions as organized and strategic, suggesting a deliberate and calculated criminal enterprise. In response to the mounting pressure, Combs's defense team, led by the experienced and often outspoken Benjamin Brahman, launched a vigorous counteroffensive. Brahman argued that the government had fundamentally misinterpreted and twisted what were essentially adult relationships into something criminal. He posited that the prosecution's case was built on sensationalism and innuendo, claiming that what they were portraying as criminal activity was nothing more than the trappings of flashy living and bad gossip within the notoriously volatile entertainment industry. In a pre-trial statement that set the stage for a contentious legal battle, Brahman asserted that the entire 5-count indictment was a flimsy construct, stitched together from rumors, personal vendettas, and stretched-out stories that lacked concrete factual basis. He further highlighted the timeline of the indictment, emphasizing that it only came to light in February of that year after a full year of intensive grand jury investigation. This investigation, Brahman argued, was fueled by sealed lawsuits containing potentially biased accounts, internal company emails taken out of context, and phone data that he claimed could ultimately flip the entire case upside down, revealing a different narrative. As the pretrial hearings progressed, significant details began to emerge, offering glimpses into the prosecution's strategy and the evidence they intended to present. One of the key revelations was the government's acknowledgement that they had offered Combs a plea deal, the specifics of which remained undisclosed. However, Combs unequivocally rejected this offer, signaling his intent to fight the charges in a full trial. This decision underscored the high stakes involved and the potential for a protracted and highly public legal battle. The two most serious counts against Combs specifically accused him of using force, fraud, or pressure in incidents that allegedly occurred between 2016 and 2020. These charges focused on specific instances of alleged coercion and manipulation, forming the core of the prosecution's case. The travel-related charges centered on trips to major entertainment hubs like Miami, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. Prosecutors alleged that Combs orchestrated these trips, setting up luxurious high-end hotel suites and employing security teams that, they claimed, restricted the women's ability to move freely and communicate independently. All of this, the prosecution argued, fell under the umbrella of one overarching scheme, a so-called exploitation enterprise. This broad charge allowed the government to introduce a wider range of evidence, potentially extending beyond the specific 5 charges and encompassing a broader pattern of alleged conspiracy and misconduct. Adding another layer of complexity, court documents named 3 main accusers, identified only by their initials to protect their privacy. However, the prosecution hinted that at least 8 more witnesses were lined up to testify, suggesting a potentially significant number of individuals prepared to share their accounts. And then came a particularly explosive revelation. A sealed court filing revealed that Cassie Ventura, the singer who had reached a private settlement with Combs the previous year following her own allegations, had now been subpoenaed to potentially provide rebuttal testimony. This development sent shockwaves through the legal and entertainment communities, as Ventura's direct involvement in the trial could prove to be a pivotal moment. The legal gears were turning rapidly, and Judge Torres demonstrated a clear intention to keep the proceedings moving forward. She swiftly shut down the defense's request for a delay in the trial, asserting that the federal prosecutors had provided sufficient discovery, the sharing of evidence, even if some digital files had been delivered later than initially anticipated. To mitigate the intense media scrutiny surrounding the case and ensure the impartiality of the jury, Judge Torres made a significant ruling. The jury would be anonymous and partially sequestered. This measure aimed to shield the jurors from external pressures and potential influence. Before the selection process even began, Judge Torres injected another moment of dark humor, quipping about Diddy's extensive list of aliases, suggesting they might be as lengthy as the jury questionnaire itself. The jury selection process itself became a focal point, with one legal expert interviewed noting its critical importance. The juror questionnaire was an unusually comprehensive 120-question deep dive into potential jurors' social media usage and their past exposure to celebrity abuse cases, indicating the meticulous effort to identify individuals capable of rendering an unbiased verdict. The selection process was expected to take a lengthy 4 days, a testament to the high-profile nature of the trial and the need for thorough vetting. Adding to the spectacle, Combs made his entrance into the federal courthouse through a private tunnel beneath the building, a measure typically reserved for high-security situations, underscoring the intense security surrounding the proceedings. He was dressed sharply in a navy wool suit and rimless glasses, projecting an image of composure. He had even received special approval to forego standard jail attire, with prison officials allowing him a rotation of 2 suits, 4 ties, and 1 pair of dress shoes for the anticipated 8-week courtroom showdown. This criminal case unfolded against the backdrop of a wave of civil lawsuits that had been filed against Combs since November 2023, accusing him of a range of disturbing behaviors, including emotional control, violence, and disturbing conduct at wild parties referred to as freak-offs. However, these civil lawsuits were temporarily paused to avoid interfering with the ongoing criminal trial, which was rapidly gaining momentum. Public court records began to reveal some potentially damaging evidence, including surveillance footage that could corroborate witness testimonies, encrypted chats that might contain incriminating communications, and banking data that prosecutors claimed tracked hush money flowing into third-party accounts, further solidifying the conspiracy allegations. Adding to his legal woes, it was revealed that Combs would be adding 2 new attorneys to his already substantial defense team, suggesting a bolstering of his legal firepower as the trial loomed. To recap the gravity of the situation, Combs, at 55 years old, faced the very real possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars if convicted on the charges of sex trafficking and racketeering, to which he had pleaded not guilty. The prosecution argued that the financial payments they had identified were not isolated incidents but rather part of a broader pattern of behavior that directly supported the overarching conspiracy charge. However, Combs's legal team dismissed these claims, characterizing them as business as usual within the entertainment industry, routine NDA settlements that were far from the shady dealings the prosecution alleged. They announced their intention to bring in forensic accountants to testify that no suspicious money was moved and that all financial transactions were properly documented and disclosed in IRS filings. Despite these assurances from the defense, some legal experts drew parallels to the 2022 conviction of R. Kelly, where federal prosecutors successfully employed similar tactics and RICO laws to secure a conviction for personal misconduct. a relatively rare but increasingly utilized legal strategy against high-profile individuals. Loyola Law professor Laurie Levinson succinctly stated that this kind of case is becoming more doable. Adding to the potential consequences for Combs, the indictment included a potential $140 million seizure targeting his extensive real estate holdings, including his lavish Beverly Hills mansion and his Long Island estate, as well as the master recordings to his iconic Bad Boy Records catalog, signaling the government's intent to dismantle his financial empire if he were found guilty. As the legal heat intensified, Combs had already begun to relinquish control of several of his business ventures to stand-in managers. His lucrative booze deal with Diageo was terminated, and Revolt Media, the media company he founded, installed a temporary board of directors as advertisers began to distance themselves from his brand. At a March court session, prosecutor Rachel Collins laid out the sheer volume of evidence the government intended to present: 48 digital exhibits, 31 physical pieces of evidence, and close to 900 pages of complex financial records. She stated that the prosecution anticipated needing 4 weeks just to present their case, and the defense would be granted equal time if they chose to call their own witnesses. Defense lawyer Benjamin Brahman remained steadfast in his narrative, claiming that the accusers were simply former insiders looking for a payout and asserting that the timelines of their allegations did not align with the claims being made. He even referenced a sealed defense exhibit that purportedly included text messages from one of the main accusers thanking Diddy for changing my life and asking for career assistance. However, prosecutors swiftly countered this, arguing that such messages did not negate the allegations of control and manipulation, suggesting that financial dependence could explain such seemingly positive communications. They also revealed their intention to introduce a 2019 audio recording from a studio session in Los Angeles where Diddy allegedly berated staff after a woman attempted to leave a private party. Brahman argued that this tape was misleading, unrelated to the specific charges, and should be excluded from the trial. Despite the defense's efforts, the potential consequences for Combs remain stark. If convicted on even the most serious counts, he could face a minimum of 15 years behind bars. And under the RICO laws, the court had the authority to stack sentences and seize substantial assets, aiming to dismantle the alleged criminal enterprise entirely. Adding a surprising element, the defense was expected to argue that Diddy's mental capacity at the time of the alleged offenses might have been diminished due to potential issues with drugs or alcohol. However, the U.S. Attorney's Office firmly stated that the case was about seeking justice for survivors and holding powerful individuals accountable. Throughout these proceedings, Combs maintained a mostly quiet demeanor in court, only breaking his silence to confirm that he understood the charges against him. Meanwhile, outside the courthouse, protest groups were organizing daily demonstrations, though the judge had imposed restrictions on the use of loudspeakers within 100 feet of the building's entrance. The trial was already generating immense media attention, with monitors logging over 28,000 online and broadcast mentions in its early stages. In the first 24 hours of jury selection alone, it became evident that finding jurors untainted by the pervasive media coverage would be a significant challenge. Cable news networks were already providing live reports during the selection phase, and streaming platforms were preparing their own recap specials, underscoring the intense public interest. The pressure was mounting, and it wasn't solely legal. Combs's Bad Boy brand was already suffering repercussions. Spotify reportedly saw a 12% drop in his monthly listeners back in April, and his fashion label, Sean John, had put a new capsule collection on hold. Despite these setbacks, some industry analysts offered a glimmer of hope, pointing to other artists like Michael Jackson, whose music streams experienced a resurgence even after massive controversies. They suggested that if Combs were to be acquitted, the damage to his brand might ultimately be temporary. Music rights attorney Dina Leap cautioned that labels would likely refrain from making any significant moves regarding Combs's catalog until the verdict was delivered. Meanwhile, the federal authorities continued their investigation with full force. Back in March, agents had raided Combs's homes in Los Angeles and Miami, seizing hard drives and security system servers. His defense team vehemently argued that these searches were excessively aggressive and had filed a motion to suppress the evidence obtained during these raids. Judge Torres deferred ruling on this motion until after the jury selection process was complete. Prosecutors countered, claiming that the digital evidence held a crucial narrative, including flight plans from his private jet broker, guest lists from nightclubs frequented by the alleged victims, and even facial recognition data that could confirm who traveled where and when. Adding another layer of legal scrutiny, the IRS had launched a separate audit, delving into potentially suspicious income generated from exclusive parties. While no tax charges had been filed yet, an IRS memo quietly filed in court hinted at unreported cash flows. Combs's public relations team responded assertively, stating that the indictment twisted his private life and completely ignored his extensive philanthropic endeavors, such as donations to historically black colleges and universities, HBCUs, and hurricane relief efforts. They argued that the government was presenting a skewed and incomplete picture. Defense lawyers were also expected to argue that some of the alleged claims fell outside the 10-year statute of limitations for the most serious charges. However, prosecutors countered by asserting that the alleged conspiracy was ongoing until at least January 2024, effectively resetting the legal timeline. Judge Torres made a crucial evidentiary ruling, stating that the jury would be informed about past civil settlements involving Combs but without any specific dollar amounts being disclosed, to prevent unfair bias. She also explicitly banned the use of the phrase hush money, instructing both legal teams to refer to them as privately negotiated agreements instead. If Combs were to be convicted, he would face a second forfeiture phase, where the government would argue for the seizure of his assets, followed by a potentially lengthy pre-sentencing review that could extend for months. Any appeals would be directed to the Second Circuit, the same court that had upheld the R. Kelly ruling based on similar legal arguments. Jury selection was set to resume, and opening statements would follow once the 12 jurors and 6 alternates were finalized. The court had tentatively scheduled May 12th for testimony to begin. As all of this unfolded, Diddy remained a largely silent figure in the Manhattan courtroom while federal prosecutors meticulously laid out their extensive witness list, comprising more than 20 individuals. This list included former employees who had intimate knowledge of his operations, medical professionals who may have treated alleged victims, and even airline staff who worked on charter flights between 2016 and 2023. The government asserted that the collective testimonies of these witnesses would pull back the curtain on years of alleged intimidation, secret deals, and serious misconduct. Prosecutor Rachel Collins informed the court that each witness would detail their specific role in facilitating the movement of alleged victims across state lines and concealing the flow of money involved. Adding another layer of intrigue, it was revealed that the prosecution had offered Diddy a plea deal just a couple of weeks prior, which he had declined, even after additional charges were added in a second superseding indictment. Defense attorney Benjamin Brafman reacted sharply to the prosecution's witness list, accusing them of employing ambush tactics by presenting last-minute names that only surfaced after the March raids on Combs's residences in Los Angeles and Miami. However, Judge Torres sided with the prosecution, ruling that the witnesses were indeed fair game, reminding all parties that under criminal rules, the government was only obligated to reveal its witness list after the jury had been officially selected. This heated exchange occurred on the second day of jury selection, a process that was moving at a glacial pace as attorneys on both sides meticulously questioned potential jurors about their exposure to media coverage and their opinions on other high-profile abuse cases. By late afternoon, only 9 jurors had been provisionally cleared from an initial pool of 150, each having undergone an exhaustive 120-question survey probing their media consumption habits, music preferences, and even their views on celebrity charity work. Outside the courtroom, Prosecutor Collins reiterated to reporters the prosecution's strategy, stating their intention to demonstrate how Diddy's powerful brand was allegedly weaponized, transforming the allure of fame and glamour into a trap for vulnerable individuals. In a significant evidentiary ruling, Judge Torres allowed the inclusion of the 2016 video appearing to show Diddy assaulting Cassie Ventura in a hotel, a piece of evidence the defense had vehemently sought to exclude. Collins stated that the prosecution's evidence also included screenshots of encrypted messages that allegedly corroborated the victims' accounts and even rideshare receipts that placed individuals at specific locations relevant to the timeline of the alleged offenses. However, Brafman dismissed this evidence as deliberately twisted, claiming that the messages were simply normal.